Richard, thanks for your time.
Thank you for asking me.
I need to explain why you look like this, don't I?
Old German rent boy look, as my wife described it, yes.
It's Michael Heseltine, isn't it?
Michael Heseltine, who was an English politician during the Thatcher years, all 11 of them, who was a cabinet minister in her government, and I think was generally held to believe that he was the one who wielded the big Brutus knife into her at the end. And they wouldn't give me a wig, and they said, would you dye your hair blonde? So I've been in the dye bucket many, many times for hours and hours. So my admiration for or astonishment at how long women can sit having things done to make their hair a different colour. So that is why I have this terrible hair colour.
And is Meryl Streep playing Margaret Thatcher?
Meryl Streep is playing Margaret Thatcher, and I think out of all the actresses or female actors in the world that could feasibly have taken this role away from an English actress, she is the one that people begrudgingly and respectfully go, oh yes, it's Meryl Streep, that's all right then.
And do you get a lot of good head-butting scenes?
I'm a walk-on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's all the script as is at the moment is all seen from Mrs. Thatcher looking back in her dotage on her life.
Oh, like Titanic.
Like Titanic, yes. Although there's no Jack Rose, no Jack, no. So I come in fleetingly into her story.
Right.
But I've never. It's the only experience that I've ever had in any rehearsal in all the hundreds of years I've been doing this profession, where actors have not wanted to leave the rehearsal room because Meryl Streep is there.
Right.
So you're at the fireside of the legend, and you're willing to feel a little bit of that heat. It's an amazing experience.
And yet she's very down to earth, isn't she?
She is. She does everything that you don't expect her to do, and she's very funny and warm and
dressed as Margaret Thatcher.
Dressed as, well, yes, yeah.
And do you need bigger, because he had enormous eyebrows, didn't he?
I'm getting them. I've got them. They're made out of mohair, and they sort of come sort of in. And he also has a defective R, so he says, ugh.
Defective arse?
Yeah.
Sorry.
R.
Defective R.
Sorry, I've learned to speak more clearly for you. I'm so sorry about that.
Yes, if you could.
They said Margaret. He can't say his R's.
Right. Okay.
R's. R.
Right. Gotcha.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll look forward to that. I want to talk about Swaziland briefly,
okay,
if I could, because I've talked to you about it before. But something I didn't realise is it true there was no telly in Swaziland when you were growing up?
Yeah, they got. I was born in black and white, really, in 1957, and all our family photographs were in black and white. So they got television in 1980.
Right, must have made going to the movies more special.
Everything, yeah. Went to there was one movie house, and then that burnt down, and then there was a drive-in. So we used to go to that, and we went twice a week religiously all through my childhood and teenage years.
And what movies, leapt out at you?
Well, when I was a teenager, all the stuff from the early... From 1970 to 1975 were the things that really informed me more than anything else. The Godfather, Cabaret, Clockwork Orange,
it's
Women
a great
in Love,
period, isn't it?
Chinatown, Serpico, The Godfather 2, all of that stuff. So Scorsese, Coppola, Altman, Nashville, those guys were, at the top of their game at that point in time. It was just pre the boom and bust of Jaws and the blockbuster syndrome that has overtaken us ever since.
Coppola, Scorsese, Altman, you've worked with all of them.
I have, yeah. So there was a dream come true to do that. But they were the sort of great folk heroes of my movie-going youth.
And so when did you decide, yep, I want to have a crack at that?
Oh, way too early. I started with shoebox theatres and then went to glove puppets and then marionettes and amateur plays. And right. So it was, looking back, it's a very clear line that I think that my parents not unreasonably hoped that I would veer away from and get a proper job. Yeah. So, anyway, it's turned out all right.
What was your first on-screen? Were you in a Penelope Keith sitcom?
You've done your research. Yes, I was cast as a Gloucestershire yokel. With about 5 lines of dialogue covered in chicken guano.
Right.
Chicken shite in a sitcom that she did called Sweet 16, which was the only sitcom that she was in that was a complete bomb.
Right.
In which Penelope Keith played a woman having a midlife crisis in love and lust with a much younger man. And the British public
don't
did
want to
not
see
want
that.
to go and see
No, it's not
Margot
right.
from The Good Life
No.
getting her rocks off with
No,
some
being the happy
totty.
hooker.
No, they didn't. So, but yes, indeed, that was my first TV job.
Right, because I remember I was working in advertising in the mid-'80s, and there was a fantastic movie which went around called Honest, Decent and True.
Oh, yeah.
And was that your first major role?
Yeah, it was an improvised thing, improvised film for the BBC that was done over 4 months, and we had to go to find a character in the same way that Mike Leigh works, of going to an advertising agency and hitting on somebody who was like your character, or that you had to investigate and then become. So that's what we did, and so I got to work with Adrian Edmondson and Gary Oldman before we'd ever made a movie. And I'd done that in 1985 and then was out of work for 9 months. And the day it was shown, I then got an agent who then got me seen for Withnail and I. And that changed my life. So that's... Thank you for reminding me of that.
No, Honest, Decent and True. I remember my boss was terrified of that movie being seen because it was quite honest about how advertising works. I remember we would do things like we would do a bromide in the dark room, and it would cost $4.50, and we would invoice the client $70. And,
so you're a crook?
Yeah, I was a criminal for several years. And
you don't mind saying that to
the
citizens of Australia?
It's back in the 80s, everybody was into it.
Okay.
But in that movie, I remember that Derek O'Connor has a fantastic speech where he explains why they would do that, and he said, we have to charge a lot of money because otherwise the client will realise it's something they can just do themselves.
Exactly.
And it was fantastic.
So you were a fan of Mad Men?
That's sort of more the high end of advertising. I was sort of more down the all stock must go kind of end of advertising. No, how many words can you fit into a 30-second read? You would never have had to do that.
So why did you leave advertising?
This is turning into one of the... This is
No, sorry.
This is like the Andrew Denton business, isn't it? You're going to start interviewing me.
I'm not. I'm just curious to know what those people that you were in the low-life end of advertising that you describe, how do they view your career now?
One of them was killed in a speedboat accident and another one's in jail. They had to keep taking names.
Shouldn't laugh.
What were we talking about? I see, I know what you're doing. You're trying to delay the inevitable Withnail question.
No, I'm not trying to delay anything. I just, you know...
Do you get to the point where there's nothing more you can say about that film?
I know it's 25 years ago this year because people have been writing to me saying, what's happening? Because this is the 25th year since it was made, and I don't know anything.
It does amaze me that this is a film that everyone seemed to think was a disaster when you were making it.
It was because it didn't have anybody that anybody had ever heard of at that point. And Paul McGann had just been in a series called The Monocled Mutineer about the First World War that was about to come out when we were just on the last day of shooting. It transmitted on that Sunday night. And, you know, it didn't have any car chases or... Crocodile Dundee was the big movie that had globally smashed through every box office record in 1986 when we were in the summer of making it. So, you know, there were no women, it didn't really have a story, and had this odd title. And I think that they, not unreasonably, thought, who in the hell will want to go and see this movie? So they stuck it on a shelf for a couple of years, not knowing, you know, to release it. And then somebody released it a year afterwards, in 1987, in the States, and it got good reviews. But again, you know, it played in the Carnegie Hall cinema for about 5 weeks and seen by 40 people. And then it opened here in England, 1988, and again had a very short run, got fairly reasonable reviews. I mean, that to me is the irony of it, that people, the critics, the same critics that dismissed it when it first came out, are now, in their dotage, saying, oh, it's like a fine wine, it's improved with age. Well, how is it improved with age? It's the same piece of film that was made then.
Yeah.
You know, it's people's perception of it has altered.
Almost every single line is quotable, is funny. You know,
good.
Every time
that's the writer. That's Bruce Robinson. It's all, you know, all credit due to him entirely. It's his story, he wrote it, he directed it, so...
For people who don't know, it's a film about two actors who go on holiday by mistake.
Okay.
Really.
At the end of the 60s.
Yeah, it's a comedy about desperation.
Yeah.
And the performance, I mean, it's such a classic performance, and yet I think you were told by somebody that you should be playing it more like Kenneth Williams.
Yeah, the producer who then George Harrison tried to sue, I'm trying to remember his name,
Dennis O'Brien.
Dennis O'Brien, who apparently is still AWOL on some island, because I met George Harrison's widow, Olivia, and said that they're still trying to find him because he owes them so much money.
Really?
Anyway, this reprehensible character, 6'5" and bald as an egg, he apparently said after the first day of rushes that the whole thing should be brightly lit and that the character should be more like Kenneth Williams and be much broader.
Right.
So Bruce Robinson told him to fuck off.
Quite rightly. I'm trying to imagine Kenneth Williams as Withnail.
I'd pay to see that.
A lot more.
That I would pay to see. We're on a holiday, man. Yeah, no, he would have been brilliant. He was brilliant with language, so he would have enjoyed it.
And, you know, it led to you working with, well, we mentioned some of the names. Robert Altman, I'm a huge Robert Altman fan.
Me too.
You were in 3 of his movies.
I was, and I would have been in a 4th, but the first one was about the life of this Italian composer Rossini, and I think 3 weeks before we started shooting, all the money collapsed. And because at this point in time, he was out of favour. This is 1989. And then when I was sitting in the screening of the premiere of this terrible movie called, with Bruce Willis, Hudson Hawk,
Yes.
he and Tim Robbins were sitting behind me, and I was sitting next to Andy McDowell, and we were both just thinking, this is the worst moment of our careers. We'll never work again. And nobody knew what the movie was going to be at this point. And he just tapped me on the shoulder and he said, what are you doing next month? And I said, oh, I'll never work again. And he said, well, I'm doing this picture called The Player. You know,
wow.
will you come and be in it, play a screenwriter? So I did, and it sort of resurrected my faith that I would get employed again. So I'm indebted to Altman.
What was his technique? I'm fascinated to know how
what he did is he pioneered a technique that nobody had done, and very few people seem to have done since, of everybody was mic'd up. He'd have 2 cameras going at the same time, so you never knew whether it was, you know, your close-up or on you. So, and he liked scenes that had 16 or more people all going at the same time, like real life. And he said people don't wait for somebody to finish speaking. They talk over it. They go, oh yeah, I remember that bit. And then you know, so all that stuff happens. And he liked that. He liked sound to be muddied up. And he pioneered this thing of multiple mics on all these different actors when he made the movie of MASH in 1968. So that if your dialogue had finished, and we carried on talking and saying, we've seen that person over there, and you know what's going on. He'd keep that, you never knew whether they were on camera or not. So, right. And he might just use bits of that, those takes and things. So everybody's concentration and commitment to their part is absolute. So you completely avoid the star hierarchy of, which I have experienced, where the star will have all his close-ups and then bugger off, never to be seen again. Yeah. And you're reading it with a Hungarian script supervisor who speaks forward of English going, I think I love you, or beautiful, beautiful. And then you're supposed to go, oh yeah, I know what you mean. Right. So that trap is avoided completely. And that means that everybody is in the same movie and on the same page, as it were, and you feel that what you're contributing is valued. And that sounds such a simple thing to do, yeah. But it is unique and was something that he did. So it was akin to going back to being a theatre actor all over again. That everybody's getting the same amount of money and you're doing it because you love doing it.
Now, if we can go from one extreme to the other, and I'm only going to say it because you've brought it up.
Okay.
Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
There it
Unless
is.
You're on drugs.
The chapter in your excellent book, Withnail.
Thank you.
It's one of the... You feel sick reading it, as you just feel something enormous and expensive just sliding down a mountainside into a lake. But you were there in the centre of it. Nobody
sets out, as far as I know, to make a bad movie.
No.
You know, apart from the producers.
Right.
You know, that was the point of it. And I think it's the equivalent of falling in love with somebody. You don't think on the first date, or do you think, this is the person that I am absolutely smitten with. Mm. You don't see yourself 10 years down the line when you want to tear each other's gizzards out, carve the children up and burn her with, you know, the house and the cars inside at the same time. And I think that's like making a movie, that you go into it with the best of faith, and when it goes wrong and how it goes wrong is a source of entertainment in retrospect, but when you're going through it, it's not a good experience.
Were you able to use any of those lessons when you directed your own film, Wah Wah?
Yes, I think that being honest with people up front was important. Sticking to the script was important. Getting good catering all of those things, and not employing people whose egos are so stratospheric that you're unable to have normal conversations with them.
I mentioned the book Withnail. It's got such a great tone in that it's, you know, you don't spare any detail. It's very cutting and acerbic, and yet it's written from the point of view of someone who's still a mad fan, who's still excited to be meeting all these people.
Yeah, I think that doesn't go away. I'm 53 3/4, and the opportunity to be in a movie with Meryl Streep is something that I never ever thought would happen to me. So the capacity for being awestruck in the middle of it all is still, that doesn't go away or change. But by the same token, the amount of shite that you have to deal with, and the stuff that is in the nature of how movies are made, and the shenanigans that go on, I suppose your tolerance level as you get older gets less and less.
Right.
And I think it's a bit like an alcoholic that hasn't had a drink or taken a drug for X number of years. It only takes one to absolutely flip them off, so that when you get lied to by a producer or you get stitched up by some particular situation, you don't take it quite as easily as you would 25 years ago when you're just grateful to have the job. You now go, don't do this to me, because otherwise I'm going to do that to you. So you get a bit, you know, the challenge, according to my wife, is to try not to turn into a grumpy old fart.
Right.
That's what I'm aiming for now, in my dotage, my blonde years.
It's something I'd forgotten about that I'd heard of for the first time when I read that book is the concept of Hollywood celebrities obtaining gerbils for sexual gratification. I'd never heard of that concept till I read your book.
Well, it was a story about a very, very well-known romantic leading actor in the 80s in Los Angeles. And this actor had reportedly reneged on a verbal agreement that he'd made with a producer to do a movie.
Right.
Didn't do the movie, and this producer, in revenge, said this guy was at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital and was seen to have a gerbil up his Khyber Pass that, you know, was pulled out, and he happened to know the sister of the person who was at the door of the ward who went in. And this thing was faxed around LA, you know, as quick as emails do now. And it stuck to this actor's reputation for at least 10 years. And if you go on the internet, you can still find it.
It can't really be true.
Gerbilactor.com, you will find it.
But surely, think about...
And it wasn't true.
I just can't imagine it really goes on. The practicalities surely would be insurmountable.
Listen, you told me that you left the low-life end of advertising X number of years ago. You're now trying to lower the tone of your very highbrow show back to gerbils up people's sphincters. Where are you going?
I'm moving on.
I have no experience of this.
Tell me about the time, and this is a serious matter, you were involved in exposing an AIDS scam. What was that about?
A neighbour of mine came to me and said a friend of hers had discovered a cure for AIDS. And I thought, oh yeah, a cure for AIDS.
Right.
So she said that this guy was using goat serum. And so I immediately went on the internet and looked up goat serum and all this stuff. But it sounded like snake oil salesman quackery to me. Anyway, he was trying to set up a $100 million US dollar scam in Swaziland with the government to build hospitals and clinics and health centres and selling this goat serum, and claimed that he had before and after pictures of people, you know, absolutely at death's door, and then going around looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I didn't know what to do about this, and there was a guy who used to work on Newsnight investigative journalist program here on the BBC, and I got in touch with him and I said, what do I do with this information, because I'd like to do anything I can. He then set up an undercover filming scam, got this guy on tape, you know, with the clipboards and things, cameras at the bottom there, however you guys do it, and got this guy who worked in conjunction. He turned out to be a South African ex-mercenary who'd been involved in military coups in West Africa, diamond dealing, all sorts of skullduggery. And he was working in conjunction with a New Zealand doctor who claimed that they had each, between the two of them, discovered a cure for AIDS, goat serum, and that Africa, where biggest concentration of AIDS victims, this is where it was going to work. So they had all that on tape first, and then they set up a scam where we met in a hotel in the middle of London, and I was to walk in, and he thought that he was meeting a businessman who was going to invest $50 million into his scam. And then I walked in, and the BBC had said to me that 96% of people who are fraudsters would immediately turn tail, as you see on all these exposés, and they, bugger off.
Yeah.
This guy did the exact opposite. He was very, very calm, and he kept coming, going, "No, Richard," and I said, "Don't touch me." He put his hand on my arm, and, trying to sort of... And I said, You've lied about all of this, and we now have you on film. This is the BBC. This programme is going to go out on World AIDS Day. What do you have to say about it? And he completely traded on his New Zealand doctor. Said, no, it was nothing to do with him. It was the New Zealand doctor who had done all this. And I said, but you're in business partnership with him. Anyway, carried on. He got more and more het up. And then suddenly there was just a switch. He became very, very calm, and he said, no, I said, if you try and touch me again... He said, no, I won't. He got very, very quiet, and then he said, I'm going to leave now. He said, I'm not walking out of here in panic. I'm just going to leave, and off he buggered. Anyway, the scam was exposed and stopped. 2 years later, he then sold an uncut ruby for £14 million to an English engineering company who were £11 million in debt. And they discovered eventually that the person who had verified that this ruby was worth all this money had worked for this guy's company. And there was a piece of glass worth £365.
Of course it was.
Yep. So he's still out there, and he's still on the run.
Well, that's...
As a result, I now don't have much contact with my neighbour.
Right.
Who came up with this, who still believes that he's a good guy. I said, I don't think so.
Well, you're stopping crime. You've directed a film. You've acted in several classic movies.
So I can die now?
You can die a happy man.
Okay.
What's coming up next?
I am about to direct a comedy western, which is Blazing Saddles meets Hot Fuzz.
Really?
It's a western construct, or all the characters and the situations, but set in an English village.
Wow.
And the villain is going to be played by an American.
Right. And
who is a legend.
Sounds great.
They don't, they're not playing it for laughs, they're just playing it dead straight, but it's, the situations and the characters are, I think, are really funny.
Well, this sounds...
So we're waiting to find out if we get all our funding. So, I could be meeting you with, my false teeth and my wig on, before I'm still saying, oh, this film's going to be made, but that's what I'm working on at the moment, so hopefully we're going to film it this summer.
All the best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
And
what are you doing next?
I've got to move the car. It's a very low-budget show.
Low budget?
We're on a 1 hour.
You're on a 1 hour?
Yeah.
And you can't afford the ticket? Yeah, but you're going back to Australia, so they wouldn't be able to trace you.
That's true. Maybe you'll have to burst in with the Newsnight cameras at some point.
Yeah, you can't burst in anymore. I got a parking ticket, incorrectly. And you can't go to an office anymore. They closed it down 2 months ago. You've got to go online. So you can't, the frustration of not being able to get a human being and go, this is incorrect. I had the parking permit. You can't do that anymore. It's part of the big brother bureaucracy in which we now live.
Well, more causes for you to rally against.
Grumpy old man syndrome.
Come on in, the water's fine.
Your wig looks very good.
People, we did one of these with Bill Bailey, and people were convinced that it's fake. It's not.
It's really good.
It's for real, because you can see, look at that. See, from the front, looks quite good, but hello, children of the corn up top.
Children of the corn, gather round, gather round. Is your father bald?
I don't know. I haven't seen him since, I think my mum threw a suitcase at him at an airport. I'm not supposed to talk about this on TV.
Are you damaged?
I work in comedy, Richard.
Welcome to our world.
Cheers.
Has he not come out of the woodwork now that you're so successful to try and claim his genetic right?
No, my family are generally unimpressed by my mother. Whenever, it doesn't matter what I do, she'll say to me, when are you going to do something like The Good Life?
That's why you're a success. No matter what I do, my mother always says, so what are you doing next? I say, well, I'm working with Meryl Streep. Yeah, but what are you doing next? And you go, what does it take? And I think that's the motor that keeps you...
What will it take to impress your mum?
Probably if Steven Spielberg called up and said...
Really? Spielberg? Scorsese? Coppola? Not good enough?
Nah, no.
Has to be Spielberg.
Probably.
Well, thanks for this, Richard. Cheers.
Thank you very much.